Max Donahue watched silently as his wife of 22 years, Vivian, hurled his clothes onto the rain-soaked lawn of their suburban Boston home. The neighbors peeked through curtains, watching the spectacle unfold while pretending not to notice.
"You're a pathetic old fool," Vivian screamed, her face contorted with rage and triumph. "The kids and I are done. We've emptied everything." Even their twin daughters, Audrey and Penelope, 19 years old and home from college, stood in the doorway with crossed arms and contemptuous expressions. Behind them lurked a man Max recognized as Terrence Walsh, his wife's tennis instructor for the past 8 months. Max merely nodded, seemingly defeated. "Very well," he said softly, his face betraying nothing. Vivian threw his wallet at him, emptied of all but his driver's license. "You can keep your sad identity," she sneered. "Everything else belongs to me now." The rain began to fall harder as Max collected his scattered belongings into a small duffel bag. Terrence stepped forward, putting his arm around Vivian's waist possessively. Max noticed his daughters flinch slightly, but remained silent. "You should know," Terrence said with a smirk. "Your family's been planning this for months. I've been keeping Vivian very happy." Max looked up at the house he'd purchased 15 years ago. The colonial-style home represented everything he'd worked for, or so Vivian believed. As lightning cracked across the sky, the corner of Max's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. "I'll be on my way then," he said calmly, turning toward his mud-splattered Honda Civic. The car Vivian had insisted was enough for him while she drove the Mercedes. "Wait!" Audrey called out suddenly. "Dad,
"Audrey," Vivian snapped, "get inside. He made his choices."
Max drove away in silence, appearing broken to anyone watching. But those who might have glimpsed his eyes would have seen not devastation, but a cold, calculated focus. 2 miles away, Max pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel and checked in using cash from a hidden pocket in his jacket. Once alone in the sparse room, he pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number from memory.
"It's begun," he said simply. "Execute Phase 1.
The Donahue family saga hadn't started with betrayal. 25 years earlier, Maxwell Donahue had been a brilliant but socially awkward graduate student in biochemistry at MIT. His research into novel drug delivery systems had attracted attention from pharmaceutical giants, but Max had kept a low profile. His family had taught him caution, lessons learned from his grandfather, who'd escaped Soviet Russia with scientific secrets and a fortune in diamonds sewn into his coat lining. When Max met Vivian Lockhart at a university function, he'd been instantly captivated by her charm and social ease. She was studying marketing, the daughter of a middle-class family who hungered for the finer things. Their courtship had been swift, Vivian seeming to see past his awkwardness to the potential beneath. What she hadn't known was that Max had already secured patents worth millions and had quietly built a pharmaceutical empire through shell companies and discreet partnerships. His apparent modesty was by design, a habit of self-protection instilled by his grandfather. "Never let them see what you truly possess," his grandfather had warned. "The moment they know your worth is the moment you become a target." Max had taken this advice to heart, presenting himself as a moderately successful research scientist while carefully amassing his empire in secret. He'd wanted a partner who valued him, not his wealth. The Honda, the modest home in a good school district, all were tests that Vivian had failed without knowing she was being tested. But there was more to the story. 3 years earlier, Max had begun to notice changes in Vivian, secretive phone calls, unexplained absences, a renewed interest in her appearance. He'd hired a private investigator who had confirmed his suspicions. Vivian had engaged in a series of affairs. Instead of confronting her immediately, Max had begun planning meticulously. The final catalyst came when he discovered that Vivian and her latest lover, Terrence, had been systematically transferring funds from what she believed was their main joint account into private accounts under her name. What she didn't know was that the account contained less than 2% of Max's actual wealth. More disturbing had been the discovery that his daughters had been turned against him through years of Vivian's subtle manipulation. Stories of how he held them back financially, how his supposed mediocrity was the reason they couldn't have everything their friends had.
As Max sat in the dingy motel room, he opened his laptop and logged into a secure server. Across the screen flashed images from hidden cameras showing Viven, Terrence, and his daughters celebrating in his living room, drinking his rare whiskey collection that he'd carefully cultivated. "To freedom from mediocrity," Viven toasted, clinking glasses with Terrence. Max zoomed in on his daughters' faces. Behind their smiles, he detected uncertainty. He made a note. There might be hope for them yet. On another screen, he pulled up the detailed dossier on Terrence Walsh, former college tennis star, now a coach who specialized in wealthy female clients. 3 divorces, each leaving him with substantial settlements. A pattern of manipulation and calculated seduction. Max closed the laptop and leaned back on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "The first lesson in biochemistry," he whispered to himself, "is that every reaction can be controlled if you understand the components." The morning after Viven's triumphant eviction of her husband, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the Donahue residence. Viven was nursing a hangover, still in her silk robe as she peered through the curtains. "Who on earth is that?" Terrence asked, joining her at the window, his chest bare. 2 men in impeccable suits approached the door. When Viven opened it, they maintained professional, expressionless faces. "Mrs. Donahue?" the taller man asked. "Yes," she replied. "I'm Gregory Reeves from Sentinel Financial Group. This is my colleague, Mr. Woodward. We need to speak with you regarding some urgent financial matters." Terrence stepped forward. "I'm her partner. Anything you can say to her, you can say to me." Mr. Reeves glanced at him, then back to Viven. "As you wish." He handed her a single document in a leather portfolio. "This requires your immediate attention." Viven scanned the document, her face growing increasingly pale. This can't be true. He owns what?" The document detailed Maxwell Donahue's ownership of Helix Pharmaceuticals, a biotechnology company valued at over $3.2 billion, along with numerous other holdings and properties across 4 continents. More shockingly, it showed that the house she stood in was owned not by either of them, but by a trust controlled solely by Maxwell. "This is impossible," she stammered. "Max is a research scientist. He makes $120,000 a year. Mr. Donahue's salary from the Research Institute is merely a stipend he accepts for appearances," Mr. Reeves explained. "He is, in fact, the majority shareholder and chief patent holder for Helix Pharmaceuticals, which he founded under his grandfather's name 18 years ago." "Then I'm entitled to half," Viven declared, recovering slightly. "We've been married for 22 years. Mr. Reeves maintained his professional demeanor. "That brings me to the second matter. You are currently occupying a property belonging to the Alexander Donahue Trust, named after Mr. Donahue's grandfather. You have no legal claim to it. We're here to inform you that you have 48 hours to vacate the premises." Terrence grabbed the document. She's his wife. "Perhaps you should consult the final page." Mr. Woodward spoke for the first time. Viven flipped to the last page and found a prenuptial agreement with her signature. A document she remembered signing but had believed was a standard marriage license supplement. The agreement specified that in case of divorce, especially one involving infidelity on her part, she would forfeit all claims to Maxwell's family assets and businesses. "He tricked me," she whispered. "The agreement has been validated by 3 separate judges this morning," Mr. Reeves continued. "Additionally, we have documentation of your systematic transfers from the joint account, which constitutes financial misconduct. Mr. Donahue has chosen not to press charges at this time, provided you comply with the evacuation notice." As the men turned to leave, Mr. Reeves added, "Oh, and Mrs. Donahue, the vehicles registered to this address, the Mercedes, the Range Rover, and your daughter's cars, are all owned by the trust as well. The keys, please." Viven stood frozen in the doorway as the men departed, leaving her holding the document that shattered her world. Behind her, Terrence was already on his phone, frantically calling someone. "We need to talk," he hissed, moving away from her. "This changes everything."
Across town, in a luxury penthouse unknown to his family, Max sat across from his longtime friend and security advisor, Ford Montgomery. A former naval intelligence officer, Ford had been the one resource Max had trusted with his true circumstances from the beginning. "Your wife received the notice," Ford confirmed, sliding a tablet across the table showing security footage from Max's home. "Terrence is already making calls." "To whom?" "His ex-wife in Philadelphia, the one with the largest settlement. He appears to be exploring exit strategies." Max nodded, unsurprised. "And my daughters?" Ford's expression softened slightly. "They weren't home. According to their phone GPS, they're at the university library." Max turned to gaze out at the Boston skyline. "What did the audio surveillance pick up last night after I left?" Ford tapped the tablet and audio began to play. Audrey's voice. "Mom, was that really necessary? Throwing his stuff on the lawn like that?" Viven replied, "He deserved worse for holding us back all these years." Penelope's voice followed, "But you said we needed his signature on those college fund transfers. If you humiliated him—" Vivian interrupted. "Don't worry about that. Your father is a pushover. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him to keep the peace." The recording continued, revealing the extent of Viven's manipulation of their daughters and her plans to secure as much money as possible before filing for divorce. "They've been poisoned against me," Max said quietly, "but not completely." "What's your next move?" Ford asked. "Viven believes she knows me. That's her fundamental mistake. She thinks I'm predictable, weak." Max pulled out a small notebook and wrote something down. "Have you finished the background work on her family?" Ford nodded, pulling up more files. "Her father died 10 years ago, a mountain of debt. Her mother, Lillian, is in an assisted living facility in New Hampshire. Viven pays the minimum for her care, visits twice a year. Her brother, Calvin Lockhart, did time for fraud and now works at a car dealership in Vermont. They speak monthly, usually when he needs money. And the man who introduced her to Terrence, Douglas Apprentice, her boss at the marketing firm. He and Terrence have a long-standing arrangement. Terrence pays Douglas a finder fee for introducing him to wealthy married women." Max closed his notebook. "Perfect. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. In the meantime, arrange a confidential meeting with Mr. Holly at Riverside Assisted Living. I'd like to visit Viven's mother." Max said carefully, "Are you sure about all this? You could just walk away with your money and start over." Max's eyes hardened. "This isn't about money, it's about justice. When you betray someone's trust, there must be consequences." The coffee shop across from the university campus was busy with students. When Audrey and Penelope Donahue entered, the twins had always been close, identical in appearance, but different in temperament. Audrey was more analytical, Penelope more empathetic. Both were visibly tense. "He's late," Penelope noted, checking her phone again. "He'll be here," Audrey replied, scanning the crowd. They in question was their father, who had texted them that morning requesting a meeting despite their mother's warnings not to contact him. Curiosity had won out. Max entered precisely at noon, dressed not in his usual rumpled academic attire, but in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. The transformation was so striking that his daughters almost didn't recognize him. "Thank you for coming," he said, sitting down across from them. "Mom would freak if she knew we were here," Penelope said nervously. "Is it true?" Audrey asked directly. "About the company? The money?" Max regarded them both carefully. "Yes. Everything in those documents is accurate." "Why?" Penelope's voice cracked. "Why did you let us believe we were just middle class? Do you know how many student loans we took out?" "You have no student loans," Max replied calmly. "Your education has been paid for in full since before you were born. The loans your mother showed you were fabricated." The twins exchanged shocked glances. "That's not possible," Audrey protested. "I signed the documents myself." Max slid 2 folders across the table. "These are the actual financial records for both of you. The trust established for each of you currently holds approximately $3 million, which becomes accessible when you turn 25. The girls stared at the documents in disbelief. Why would Mom lie about this? Penelope whispered. That's a question you should ask her, Max replied. But more importantly, I need to know something from both of you. Did you know about Terrence before yesterday? The twins exchanged uncomfortable glances. We met him 3 months ago, Audrey admitted. Mom said he was her personal trainer at first, but it was obvious. And you didn't tell me. Mom said you two had an arrangement. Penelope said defensively. That you were cold and distant, and that you had your own affairs. Max's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. I see. Dad, Audrey leaned forward. What's going to happen now? Mom got some legal notice this morning and she's been screaming on the phone with lawyers all day. Your mother and I are over, Max said simply. As for what happens next, that depends partially on you too. What do you mean? Penelope asked. You can align with your mother, in which case I won't interfere, but I also won't provide beyond your existing trusts, Max said, his voice measured. Or you can maintain relationships with both of us independently. Or, he paused, looking at them closely, you can help me. Help you what? Audrey's eyes narrowed. Understand the full scope of the deception. Max checked his watch. I don't expect an answer today. Take some time to think. Verify the information I've given you. Ask your mother difficult questions. He stood, leaving a business card with each of them. This has my private number. I'm staying at the Harborview Hotel, not the motel where your mother thinks I am. When you're ready to talk again, call me. As he walked away, Penelope called after him. Dad, were you ever going to tell us about the money? The company? Max turned back. On your 25th birthday, you would have learned everything. I wanted you both to develop independence, to know your own capabilities before wealth complicated things. His voice softened slightly. My grandfather taught me that true character is revealed when people think no one of consequence is watching. Later that afternoon, Max sat across from Lillian Lockhart in the sun-filled conservatory of Riverside Assisted Living. At 73, Lillian remained sharp-minded despite her physical frailty. You're not what I expected, she said, studying him. Vivian always described you as timid. Appearances can be useful, Max replied. Mrs. Lockhart, I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I believe we have matters to discuss regarding your daughter. Lillian's laugh was brittle. Which version of my daughter do you want to discuss? The one she shows you or the real Vivian? I'd like to hear about the real Vivian. For the next hour, Lillian painted a picture of a daughter who had been calculating from childhood, manipulating situations to her advantage, blaming others for her mistakes, and abandoning those who no longer served her purposes. She moved me in here after Walter died, Lillian explained, gesturing around the facility. Told everyone it was the best care money could buy. What she doesn't mention is that I'm in the most basic room they offer while she writes off the maximum for elder care on her taxes. Mrs. Lockhart, Max said carefully, would you be willing to make a statement about certain conversations you've had with Vivian, specifically regarding her plans for her marriage? Lillian's eyes narrowed. What do you have in mind? Justice, Max replied simply. When he left an hour later, Max had a signed affidavit and a voice recording detailing Vivian's long-standing plans to upgrade from Max once she'd extracted maximum value from the marriage. His next stop was Vermont, where Calvin Lockhart was closing up the used car lot for the day. Calvin, a shorter male version of Vivian with the same manipulative charm, was initially hostile until Max mentioned a potential business opportunity. Over drinks at a nearby bar, Max listened as Calvin, loosened by alcohol, revealed years of confidences from his sister about her extramarital activities and financial schemes. She always said you were her meal ticket until something better came along, Calvin slurred. No offense, man. None taken, Max replied smoothly. Would you be interested in a consulting fee to help me understand more about your sister's patterns? Calvin's eyes lit up at the mention of money. What kind of consulting fee are we talking about? By midnight, Max had another sworn statement and bank transfer details for Calvin's consulting services. As Calvin stumbled to a taxi, he had no idea he'd just sold out his sister to the very man she'd underestimated for decades. Back in his hotel suite, Max updated his notebook with the day's findings. Ford arrived with additional files.
Douglas Apprentice has accepted the meeting for tomorrow, Ford reported, and I've compiled the financial records you requested from the marketing firm where Vivan works.
Excellent, Max said, studying the new information. Has there been any movement from Terrence? He checked into the airport Marriott 2 hours ago, paid cash. He tried calling your daughters 3 times. They didn't answer. Max nodded, pleased. The first dominoes are falling exactly as planned. And Vivan is still at the house, packing essentials. She's called 17 different attorneys today. None have agreed to take her case. Because none exist in Boston who don't have conflicts of interest with my companies, Max said with the faintest smile. A useful coincidence. That's not coincidence, Ford corrected. That's 10 years of strategic legal retainers you've been paying. Max closed his notebook. Tomorrow we visit Mr. Apprentice, and then we accelerate. Douglas Apprentice's corner office at Meridian Marketing Group showcased his inflated sense of self-importance. Awards lined the walls, though a discerning eye might notice they were mostly participation recognitions rather than actual achievements. Mr. Donahue, he said, with false warmth as Max entered. What a pleasant surprise, though I must say, given the circumstances with Vivan, this is somewhat awkward. Max took the offered seat, setting a slim briefcase on his lap. I appreciate you making time, Douglas. I understand you and my wife have worked closely for many years. Professional colleagues only, Douglas said quickly, though I was sorry to hear about your domestic situation. Were you? Max asked mildly. That's interesting, considering you introduced my wife to her current romantic partner approximately 8 months ago at the Westridge Country Club charity gala. Douglas's smile faltered. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Max opened his briefcase and removed a folder. I have statements from 7 women documenting your arrangement with Terrence Walsh. You identify unhappily married women with financial resources, introduce them to Terrence, and receive a 10% commission on whatever he extracts from them financially. The color drained from Douglas's face. That's absurd. Completely unfounded. Is it? Max asked smoothly. Here are bank records showing transfers from Terrence to your offshore account in the Cayman Islands. And here, Max continued, laying down photographs, is visual evidence of your meetings with Terrence before and after he began his relationship with Vivan. Douglas swallowed hard. What do you want? First, your resignation from this firm effective immediately. Second, a complete statement detailing your arrangement with Terrence, particularly as it pertains to my wife. Third, you will transfer all commissions you received from my wife's situation to a charity of my choosing. You can't prove any of this would stand up in court, Douglas blustered, though his confidence was clearly shaken. Max's smile never reached his eyes. Douglas, you misunderstand. I'm not threatening legal action. I'm offering you a choice between a humiliating public exposure that will destroy your career and personal life, or a quiet resignation with your reputation mostly intact. And if I refuse? Max stood, gathering his materials. Then by this time tomorrow, every client of Meridian Marketing will receive a detailed dossier on your activities. Additionally, your wife will receive evidence of your relationship with your assistant Monica, your choice. As Max walked out, Douglas called after him. She never loved you, you know, Vivan. She was always looking for something better. Max paused without turning around. I know, the difference is I'm done looking. Vivian Donahue had spent the day in escalating panic. The movers she'd hired refused to continue packing when they received a call from their dispatcher about a property dispute. Her credit cards had been declined at the hotel where she'd tried to secure a room. The bank had frozen the accounts she thought she controlled. Most disturbing of all, None of the lawyers she contacted would take her case once they heard her husband's name. When her cell phone rang, showing her brother's number, she answered desperately. "Calvin, thank goodness. I need your help."
"Sorry, sis." Calvin's voice was surprisingly sober. "I can't help you." "What are you talking about? I need a place to stay. Just for a few days while I sort this out." "You don't understand," Calvin replied. "I can't be involved with you anymore. Ever." "What? Why not?" "Your husband paid me a visit," Calvin said, "showed me some interesting documents. Turns out the loans I've been getting from you were actually coming from him all along, and now I've got a real job offer, legitimate work with a legitimate company. All I had to do was tell the truth about you." "You backstabbing piece of—" "Goodbye, Vivan," Calvin interrupted. "Don't call me again." The line went dead, leaving Vivan staring at her phone in disbelief. She immediately tried calling her daughters, but both went straight to voicemail. When the doorbell rang, she hurried to answer it, expecting, hoping, it might be Max coming to negotiate. Instead, she found a courier with another legal document. This one was from her employer, Meridian Marketing Group, terminating her employment effective immediately. The reason cited was undisclosed conflicts of interest and violation of company ethics policies. Vivan sank onto the stairs, the paper clutched in her shaking hands. Somehow, in just 24 hours, her carefully constructed world was disintegrating. This wasn't the Maxwell she knew, the passive, accommodating man who avoided conflict at all costs. Her phone rang again. It was Terrence. "Vivan, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "This guy you're married to, who the heck is he, really?" "I don't know anymore," Vivan admitted. "He's not acting like himself." "Well, I just got fired from the country club. Apparently your husband bought a controlling interest in it this morning and had me terminated, and my bank accounts are frozen. Can you come over? We need to figure this out together." There was a telling pause. "Actually, I think it's better if we cool things for a while. This guy is obviously connected, and I don't want to make things worse." "You're leaving me?" Vivan couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Look, call me when this blows over. I'm going to stay with a friend out of state for a while." Before she could reply, the line went dead. Vivan looked around the house that suddenly was no longer hers, at the half-packed boxes that she now had nowhere to send, and for the first time felt real fear. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "The Harborview Restaurant, 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone if you want to negotiate terms. M." Max sat at a private table in the exclusive Harborview, Boston's most prestigious restaurant. From his position, he could see the entire dining room while remaining partially secluded. He checked his watch. 7:58 p.m. Vivan arrived precisely at 8, looking considerably less polished than usual. She'd clearly dressed to appeal to him, wearing a conservative blue dress he'd once complimented, her hair styled the way he liked, subtle makeup. As she approached his table, her eyes widened at his appearance. The Max she knew wore rumpled khakis and button-downs. This Max wore a bespoke suit that probably cost more than a month's rent, with a quiet confidence she'd never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said, rising slightly as she took her seat. "You've been busy," she replied, trying to sound confident. "Indeed." He gestured to the wine already poured for her. "Your favorite Chardonnay." Vivan left it untouched. "What is this, Max? What game are you playing?" "No game, Vivan. Just truth, finally." He opened a tablet and slid it toward her. "These are my terms." Vivan read through the document, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, fear. "This is insane," she whispered. "You're giving me nothing. A small apartment in New Hampshire near my mother's facility, a monthly stipend that barely covers essentials, no lump sum, no property. Considering the alternative is bankruptcy and potential fraud charges, I believe it's quite generous," Max replied evenly. "The courts would never allow this. No judge would. Every family court judge in Massachusetts has children or grandchildren who have benefited from scholarships established by my foundation,"
Max interrupted. "Every major law firm has ties to my companies. This isn't a negotiation, Vivian. It's an offer of mercy you don't deserve." Vivian's composure cracked. 22 years, Max. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to me," he replied, his voice finally showing emotion, a deep, controlled anger. "I gave you my trust, my name, my loyalty. You gave me lies. I made mistakes. Yes, but mistakes." Max's laugh was hollow. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in anger. What you did was calculated betrayal year after year." He pulled out photos of her with not just Terrence but 3 other men over the past 5 years, bank statements showing her systematic siphoning of funds, transcripts of her conversations with her mother and brother about her plans to leave him once she'd secured enough money. "How long have you been watching me?" Vivian asked, her voice small. "Long enough." Max's expression was resolute. "Sign the agreement, Vivian. Walk away with something instead of nothing." Her eyes flashed. "And if I don't, if I fight this, I could go to the media. Rich man keeps wife in the dark, lives double life." Max smiled, but it was the cold smile of a predator. "By all means. I've prepared a press package as well, complete with evidence of your affairs, your financial manipulations, your treatment of your mother, your comments to our daughters about me. Are you prepared for Audrey and Penelope to see that side of you?" At the mention of their daughters, Vivian paled. "Where are they? What have you told them?" "I've told them only the truth, with evidence they can verify independently. What they decide to do with that information is up to them." Vivian stared at the agreement for a long moment, then at her husband, this stranger she'd apparently never really known. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I am exactly who I've always been," Max replied. "You just never bothered to look beyond what you wanted to see." Vivian signed the agreement with a shaking hand. As she did, Max noticed a text message appear on her phone. "V got a clean start package from your husband, $500K to disappear and never contact you again. Sorry, babe. Taking the deal. T." Max allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. Terrence had been even easier to buy off than anticipated. "One last thing," Max said as Vivian stood to leave. "Your new apartment will be ready tomorrow. A car will pick you up at noon. Pack only personal items. Everything else stays." "Max," Vivian said, her voice cracking, "why did you hide everything from me all these years? The money, the company? Was it all just to set me up for this?" "No," Max said thoughtfully. "It was a test I desperately hoped you would pass." He looked up at her, his eyes clear and cold. "You failed a long time ago, Vivian. I just finally stopped hoping you'd change." The luxury penthouse that served as Max's true residence occupied the top 2 floors of a discreet building in Boston's financial district. Few knew of its existence, a deliberate choice Max had made years ago to separate his public and private lives. The morning after his meeting with Vivian, he sat in his home office reviewing reports when the security system announced visitors, his daughters. Max watched on the monitor as they stepped into the private elevator, looking nervous and out of place. When they entered the penthouse, their shock was evident. The space was a stark contrast to the modest colonial home they'd grown up in. Minimalist, elegant, with museum-quality art and breathtaking views of the city. "Dad?" Audrey called out hesitantly. Max emerged from his office. "Thank you for coming. Would you like some coffee?" "What is this place?" Penelope asked, turning in a slow circle to take in the surroundings. "My home," Max replied simply. "For the past 15 years, while we were growing up Audrey began. In a perfectly comfortable 4-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood with excellent schools," Max finished. "Yes." The twins exchanged glances, communicating silently as they had since childhood. "We talked to Mom last night," Penelope said finally. "She was different. Scared." "She should be," Max said without emotion. "Her plans have collapsed rather spectacularly." "She said you're destroying her,"
Audrey challenged. That you're using your money and power to punish her.
Is that how she phrases it?
Max gestured for them to sit in the living area. Did she mention that she's been systematically betraying our marriage for at least 5 years? Or that she planned to divorce me once she'd secured enough assets? Or perhaps she told you about how she's been lying to you about your financial situation your entire lives? The twins sat in uncomfortable silence. We found our trust documents, Audrey admitted finally. We verified them independently. They're real. Why would she lie to us about college funds when we actually had trusts? Penelope asked, genuinely confused.
Control, Max answered simply. If you believed you were dependent on her financial management, it gave her leverage. The same reason she portrayed me as financially inadequate, to ensure your loyalty to her in case of conflict.
That's horrible, Penelope whispered. We also spoke with Grandmother Lockhart, Audrey added. She told us things about Mom, patterns we never noticed. Max watched his daughters carefully. They were intelligent young women on the cusp of adulthood, grappling with the collapse of their understanding of their family. I don't expect you to choose sides, he said finally. Whatever happens between your mother and me, you are both my daughters. That will never change. But you're making Mom move to New Hampshire, Penelope protested. You're taking everything from her. Not everything, Max corrected. She'll have a comfortable place to live, an allowance sufficient for her needs, and the opportunity to rebuild a relationship with her mother. What she won't have is the wealth she expected to extract from our marriage, nor will she have Terrence, who accepted money to disappear. She cheated on you, Audrey said bluntly, multiple times apparently, and she lied to us our whole lives. Why didn't you just divorce her years ago when you first found out? Max's expression softened slightly. Because of you too. I wanted you to have an intact family through high school at least. And perhaps, I kept hoping she would change. Penelope, always the more emotional twin, had tears in her eyes. All those times she told us you were holding us back financially, that we couldn't afford things because you wouldn't work harder. I'm sorry you were put in that position, Max said sincerely. I made mistakes too. My secrecy, while intended to protect our family, clearly had unintended consequences. Audrey, ever practical, leaned forward. What happens now to all of us? That depends partially on what you both want, Max replied. You're adults now. You can choose to maintain relationships with both your mother and me or focus on your education and let us resolve our issues without your involvement. The twins exchanged another look. We want to know you, Audrey said finally. The real you, not the version Mom described all these years. And Penelope added, we want to understand our family history, where all this came from, who we really are. Max felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. I'd like that very much, he said. The conversation lasted hours, with Max sharing the story of his grandfather's escape from Russia with scientific secrets, his own early work in pharmaceuticals, and the empire he'd built while maintaining his cover as a modest research scientist. By evening, when the twins prepared to leave, a new understanding had begun to form between them. Not forgiveness or complete reconciliation yet, but a foundation for something that might eventually heal. As they waited for the elevator, Penelope asked quietly, Dad, will you ever forgive Mom? Max considered the question carefully. Forgiveness requires remorse, Penelope. True remorse, not just regret at being caught. Your mother hasn't shown that capacity yet. And if she does, Audrey pressed, then she will have grown as a person, Max replied. But our marriage is over regardless. Some betrayals cannot be undone. After his daughters left, Max updated his plans. Their reaction had been better than he'd dared hope for. They were questioning, processing, seeking truth rather than blindly accepting either parent's version of events. Ford arrived later with updates on Vivan's movements. She had spent the day in increasingly desperate attempts to secure legal representation and financial resources, all of which had been systematically blocked. The car will collect her tomorrow as scheduled, Ford confirmed. The New Hampshire apartment is ready, stocked with essentials, basic furnishings, nothing extravagant.
and her mother, Mrs. Lockhart, has been moved to the premium care wing as you instructed. Her new suite is quite comfortable." Max nodded. "Ensure that Vivian's monthly allowance is automatically deposited in her new account, with the stipulation that it continues only if she remains in New Hampshire and makes weekly visits to her mother." "Bit harsh, isn't it?" Ford observed. "Exiling her to New Hampshire to care for a mother she's neglected." "It's an opportunity for growth," Max replied. "Whether she takes it is up to her." "And the next phase?" Ford asked. Max turned to the wall of monitors displaying various aspects of his ongoing plan. "We focus on Douglas Apprentice and his network. I want every man involved in this predatory scheme exposed and neutralized. Terrence is already on a plane to Australia with his payoff and a one-way ticket," Ford reported. "Good. He's the least of them, just a tool. Douglas and the others who facilitate these arrangements are the real problem." Max's expression hardened. "By the time I'm finished, no one in Boston will dare engage in their particular brand of exploitation again." The Westridge Country Club's annual charity gala was Boston's premier social event, drawing the city's elite for an evening of performative philanthropy and status signaling. In previous years, Max had avoided the event, sending Vivian with a donation check while he claimed to be working late. This year, however, Maxwell Donahue arrived alone, causing a ripple of whispers as he entered the grand ballroom. The rumors of his separation from Vivian had spread through Boston's upper circles, along with speculation about his newly revealed wealth and position. Max called Bernard Whitmore, chairman of the club's board and a longtime acquaintance. "Splendid to see you, though I must say, we were surprised when you purchased those membership shares last week." "A long overdue investment," Max replied smoothly. "I've always appreciated the club's atmosphere." Bernard lowered his voice. "I hope there are no hard feelings about that unfortunate business with your wife's tennis instructor." The board had no idea. Of course not," Max said with a thin smile. Water under the bridge now. As Max circulated through the room, he noted with satisfaction how many of Boston's social elite suddenly found him fascinating, the same people who had previously viewed him as Vivian's unremarkable husband. The power of perception was remarkable. Across the room, Max spotted Douglas Apprentice looking uncomfortable, nursing a drink in a corner while avoiding eye contact. Beside him stood Roland Wakefield, another of Terrence's business associates who connected the tennis pro with potential targets. Max approached them directly, enjoying how Douglas paled visibly. "Gentlemen," Max greeted them. "Lovely evening, isn't it?" "Donahue." Roland nodded stiffly, clearly uncertain how to react. "Surprised to see you here after recent events." "Life is full of surprises," Max replied pleasantly. "Douglas certainly found that out this week." Douglas swallowed hard. "Max, about that. I want you to know." "Save it." Max cut him off, his voice still pleasant but his eyes cold. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to let you both know that your particular business model is no longer operational in Boston." Roland frowned. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "No implications, Roland. Just facts." Max sipped his champagne. "Douglas has already provided a complete statement about your arrangement with Terrence Walsh and other similar professionals. The documentation is quite thorough." The color drained from Roland's face. "You can't prove anything." "I already have." Max looked between the two men. "Douglas chose cooperation. You have the same opportunity. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. Restitution to the women you've helped defraud, a full statement, and you might avoid criminal charges." As Max walked away, he heard Roland hissing at Douglas. "What did you tell him, you spineless coward?" The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Max's daughters, who entered the ballroom together. They had agreed to meet him at the event, their first public appearance as a family since the separation. Heads turned as they made their way to their father. Both young women had arrived dressed elegantly but conservatively, having rejected their mother's previous guidance toward revealing attire for such events. "You came," Max said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "We said we would," Audrey replied, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Penelope glanced around nervously.
Everyone's staring.
"Let them," Max said simply. "Tonight marks a new chapter." As the evening progressed, Max introduced his daughters to key figures in Boston's business community, connections that could benefit their future careers. He spoke openly about his pharmaceutical companies and research foundations, no longer hiding behind his cultivated image of academic modesty. Near midnight, as the gala was winding down, Bernard Whitmore clinked a glass for attention and invited Max to the podium, an unexpected development. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bernard announced, "we have a surprise addition to our program. As many of you know, Maxwell Donahue recently became a major supporter of our club. What you may not know is that he has also become the single largest donor in the history of our annual charity initiative. Max, would you say a few words?" As Max approached the podium, murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the retiring academic they thought they knew. "Thank you, Bernard," Max began. "For many years, I've observed this community from a certain distance. Some of you thought you knew me as simply Vivian Donahue's husband, a modest research scientist." He allowed a small smile. "Appearances can be deceiving." The room was utterly silent now. "Tonight, I am pleased to announce the establishment of the Donahue Foundation for Ethical Research and Family Protection. With an initial endowment of $50 million, the foundation will focus on two primary missions: advancing ethical pharmaceutical research and providing resources for families affected by betrayal and fraud. The specific word choice, betrayal and fraud, was not lost on those in the room who knew about his marital situation. In particular, Max continued, the foundation will provide legal support for spouses who find themselves victims of systematic manipulation and financial exploitation. Our first initiative is a partnership with the District Attorney's Office to investigate a certain pattern of predatory behavior that has been targeting wealthy married individuals in our community. His gaze swept meaningfully toward Douglas and Roland, who looked as though they might be ill. Life often gives us opportunities disguised as setbacks. My recent personal challenges have clarified what truly matters: integrity, truth, and justice. I invite all of you to join me in supporting these values. The applause was thunderous, though tinged with nervousness from certain quarters of the room. As Max rejoined his daughters, Penelope whispered, "That was about more than charity, wasn't it?" "Everything has multiple purposes," Max replied quietly. Lesson 1 in strategic thinking. Audrey studied her father with new appreciation. "You've been planning this for a long time." "I prefer to be prepared for all eventualities," Max acknowledged. As they prepared to leave, Bernard approached with a concerned expression.
Brilliant speech, Max, truly. But I've just received a rather alarming call. It seems reporters have received anonymous tips about certain unsavory activities involving club members and staff. They're outside waiting for comments.
Max affected surprise. "How unfortunate. Which members are implicated?" Bernard leaned closer. "Roland Wakefield, Douglas Apprentice, and several others. Something about a scheme involving tennis instructors and vulnerable married clients. It sounds preposterous, but the reporters claim to have documentation." "How shocking," Max said, his expression appropriately concerned. "The club should probably distance itself immediately. Perhaps a statement about cooperating with any investigation." Yes, of course," Bernard agreed hastily. "Will you be all right leaving through that media circus?" "I believe we'll manage," Max replied calmly. "After all, we have nothing to hide." As Max and his daughters departed through the front entrance, cameras flashed and reporters called questions. Not at them, but at the ashen-faced men being escorted outside exits by security. "Did you do that?" Penelope asked once they were in Max's car. "Tip off the media?" "I believe in transparency," Max replied cryptically, "especially regarding matters of public interest." Audrey's phone buzzed with a news alert,
She read it aloud. Boston elite exposed. Country club scandal implicates prominent businessmen. It's already hitting the news sites, Penelope remarked.
That was fast. The truth, once released, tends to move at its own pace. Max observed, directing his driver toward his penthouse. The hard part is deciding when to release it. As they drove through the night, Max reflected on the evening's developments. Phase 2 of his plan was complete. The public exposure of the network that had facilitated his wife's betrayal. The men involved would face legal and social consequences far beyond what he could have arranged privately. Most importantly, his daughters were beginning to understand who he truly was. Not the pushover their mother had described for years, but a man of calculation, principle, and when necessary, controlled retribution.
"Dad?" Audrey said hesitantly. "What happens to Mom now? With all this coming out publicly?"
Your mother is safely distanced from the scandal, Max assured them. Her name won't appear in any reports. She has the chance to start over in New Hampshire, away from these influences.
"That's surprisingly merciful," Penelope noted.
Mercy and justice aren't mutually exclusive, Max replied. The guilty are being punished. Your mother has lost what she valued most, status, luxury, social position. But she has the opportunity to rebuild a life based on something more substantial.
"Do you think she will?" Audrey asked. Max considered this.
People rarely change fundamentally. But sometimes, when all their illusions are stripped away, they discover truths about themselves they've been avoiding. We'll see. 3 months after the charity gala scandal, Boston's social landscape had been permanently altered. Douglas Apprentice had fled to Florida after settling multiple lawsuits from former clients of his introduction service. Roland Wakefield faced criminal charges for fraud and extortion. The Westridge Country Club had undergone a complete board overhaul, with Maxwell Donahue now serving as chairman. On a crisp autumn morning, Max sat in his office at Helix Pharmaceuticals, no longer hiding his connection to the company he'd built. On his desk lay the morning's Boston Globe, featuring a front-page story about the Donahue Foundation's latest initiative, funding research into long-neglected rare diseases. His assistant announced an unexpected visitor, Calvin Lockhart, Vivian's brother. Calvin entered nervously, looking considerably more professional than when Max had last seen him in Vermont. The consulting fee and subsequent job at one of Max's subsidiary companies had apparently motivated a significant lifestyle change. "Mr. Donahue," Calvin began awkwardly, "thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "What can I do for you, Calvin?" Max asked, remaining seated. "It's about Vivian." Calvin shifted uncomfortably. "I visited her last weekend in New Hampshire. She's not doing well." Max's expression remained neutral. "She has adequate housing, a monthly allowance, and access to health care. Define not doing well." "She's drinking too much, barely leaving the apartment except to see Mom, which was your requirement. She's broken, Max, and this concerns you now because—" Calvin flinched at the coldness in Max's tone. "Look, I know what she did was wrong. I helped her, told her things I shouldn't have. But she's still my sister." "What exactly are you asking for, Calvin?" "Just maybe ease up a little. Let her move somewhere besides New Hampshire. She's served 3 months of what feels like a life sentence." Max considered this, studying Vivian's brother. "Your concern is noted. Is there anything else?" Calvin hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "She asked me to give you this. Said it wasn't for the lawyers or anything formal, just for you to read." Max accepted the envelope without opening it. "Thank you for delivering it." Recognizing dismissal, Calvin stood to leave. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Donahue, the job you arranged for me, it's changed my life. First legitimate opportunity I've ever had. I appreciate that, even if I don't understand why you did it." After Calvin left, Max opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from Vivian, the first direct communication since their meeting at the Harborview 3 months earlier. "Max,
I don't expect forgiveness or even understanding. What I did to you over the years is unforgivable, and I see that clearly now. The irony isn't lost on me that I only recognized your true worth when you showed me who you really are. The man I never bothered to see beneath the facade. These months in exile have given me time to reflect. Mom and I talk now, really talk. She's shown me mirrors I've been avoiding my whole life. It's not pretty. I won't ask you to change the terms of our arrangement. I don't deserve better, but I wanted you to know that I am genuinely sorry for the pain I caused you. Not sorry I got caught, not sorry I lost the lifestyle. Sorry for betraying the one person who actually loved me for who I was, flaws and all. The girls tell me you're doing well. I'm glad they speak of you with respect now, something I robbed them of for too long with my lies. I don't know if you'll ever read this or if you'll just have your lawyers file it away, but I needed to write it regardless. Vivian. Max read the letter twice, then set it aside, his expression thoughtful. He pressed the intercom. Patricia, please ask Ford to join me. When Ford arrived, Max handed him Viven's letter.
What do you make of this?
Ford read it carefully. Could be genuine, could be another manipulation. Hard to tell with her. My thoughts exactly, Max agreed. Arrange for additional surveillance in New Hampshire. I want to know if this apparent remorse translates to actual behavioral change. And if it does, Ford asked, then we reassess, carefully. Later that evening, Max met his daughters for dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. Both young women had returned to university after the summer's upheaval, but made time for weekly dinners with their father. How's the new research project? Audrey asked as they waited for their meals. She had begun an internship at Helix Pharmaceuticals' research division, showing a natural aptitude for the family business. Promising, Max replied. The trial results for the new delivery system are exceeding expectations. Penelope, who had chosen a different path, psychology with a focus on family systems, studied her father carefully. You seem distracted tonight, Dad. Max smiled slightly. His younger daughter, by 7 minutes, had always been perceptive. I received a letter from your mother today. Both twins straightened, exchanging quick glances. What did she say? Audrey asked cautiously. She expressed remorse, claimed to be reflecting on her choices. Do you believe her? Penelope asked. Max considered the question. I'm reserving judgment. People can change, but it typically requires significant motivation and sustained effort. We spoke to her yesterday, Audrey admitted. She does seem different, less defensive, more willing to admit her mistakes. She asked about you, Penelope added. Not about money or the divorce or anything practical. She wanted to know if you were happy. Max raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. And what did you tell her? That you seem more yourself now, Audrey replied. More authentic than you ever were when you were together. The conversation shifted to other topics, but Max found himself returning to thoughts of Viven's letter throughout the evening. Not out of lingering attachment, but from a scientist's natural curiosity about whether fundamental character change was truly possible. After dinner, as they walked to their cars, Penelope asked quietly, Dad, if Mom really is changing, would you ever consider forgiving her? Max stopped, considering his answer carefully. Forgiveness isn't a simple transaction, Penelope. It doesn't erase consequences or restore trust. But is it possible? She pressed. I can acknowledge genuine remorse if it exists, Max said finally. I can even respect sincere efforts to change, but some betrayals alter the landscape permanently. There's no going back to what was before. Audrey, ever practical, asked the question her sister was avoiding. Will you ease her restrictions? Let her leave New Hampshire? Maybe increase her allowance? Perhaps, Max allowed. If her behavior over time suggests true growth rather than temporary performance for an audience. As he drove home alone, Max found himself at a crossroads of sorts. The first phases of his plan had executed perfectly. Viven had been removed from his life, his true identity revealed,
his daughters brought into his confidence, and those who had facilitated his wife's betrayal had faced justice. What remained was the question of what kind of man he wished to be in the aftermath, merciless to the end, or capable of measured clemency when warranted. He had no answer yet, but for the first time in months, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that even Vivian Lockhart might be capable of genuine change.
6 months after Viven's letter, winter had settled over Boston. Max had established a new normal, running his companies openly, developing closer relationships with his daughters, and even cautiously re-entering social circles on his own terms. The Donahue Foundation had become his public focus, with initiatives that strategically combined his scientific interests with subtle messages about trust and accountability. The press had dubbed him Boston's enigmatic billionaire, fascinated by the double life he'd maintained for decades. On a snowy December morning, Max received an unusual call from Lillian Lockhart. "Mr. Donahue," Lillian began formally, "I hope I'm not overstepping by contacting you directly." "Not at all, Mrs. Lockhart. How are you finding your new accommodations?" Max had arranged for her to move to a premium suite shortly after Viven's relocation to New Hampshire. "Quite lovely, thank you. But that's not why I'm calling." She paused. "It's about Viven." Max's grip tightened imperceptibly on the phone. "Is she well?" "Physically, yes. But I believe you should know something. She's been volunteering at a women's shelter here in Portsmouth, 3 days a week for the past 4 months, counseling women who've left abusive relationships or faced financial exploitation." This was unexpected information. Max's surveillance had confirmed Viven's regular visits to her mother, but hadn't reported this development. "That's commendable," Max said carefully. "She doesn't know I'm calling you," Lillian continued. "She doesn't do it for show. No social media posts, no attempt to leverage it for sympathy. She just does the work." Lillian's voice softened. "I've known my daughter her entire life, Mr. Donahue. I've never seen her invest herself in something that didn't provide immediate personal benefit." "People can surprise us," Max acknowledged. "Indeed they can. Sometimes even themselves." Lillian paused again. "She's also been sober for 5 months. Attends meetings regularly." "Thank you for sharing this, Mrs. Lockhart. I appreciate your candor." After ending the call, Max sat in thoughtful silence. Then he summoned Ford. "I need to go to New Hampshire," he said simply. "Arrange it quietly." Portsmouth, New Hampshire, was a picturesque coastal town that wore winter well, its colonial architecture enhanced by freshly fallen snow. Max watched from his parked car as Viven emerged from the women's center where she volunteered. She looked different, thinner, with simpler clothing and her hair cut shorter than she had worn it during their marriage. She walked with a woman who appeared to be in distress, speaking encouragingly and guiding her toward a coffee shop across the street. Max followed at a discreet distance, taking a table in the corner where he could observe without being immediately noticed. For nearly an hour he watched as Viven listened intently to the woman, occasionally offering what appeared to be practical advice. When they parted, Viven hugged the woman warmly. It was such a contrast to the Viven he'd known, the social climber, always calculating angles, always performing for an audience, that Max found himself genuinely intrigued. As Viven gathered her things to leave, she finally noticed him. The color drained from her face, and she froze momentarily before approaching his table, visible apprehension in her movements. "Max," she said softly, "this is unexpected." "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the chair across from him. Viven nodded, sitting down carefully. "How did you find me?" "I've always known where you are," Max replied matter-of-factly. "Your mother called me this morning." "Mom?" Viven looked surprised. "Why would she?" "She wanted me to know about your volunteer work, said you've been helping women in difficult situations." Viven looked down at her hands. "It's not much, just trying to be useful." "That woman you were with, she seemed distressed." "Lisa. Her husband cleaned out their accounts and disappeared last month, left her with 2 kids and a mountain of debt."
Viven's expression hardened slightly. Sound familiar? Except you were the one planning that scenario in our case, Max noted without inflection. Viven winced, but didn't deny it. Yes, I was. Which is why I can help women like Lisa navigate the aftermath. I understand the mindset of the people who hurt them. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Your letter, Max said finally. Did you mean what you wrote? Every word, Viven replied without hesitation, though I don't expect you to believe that. Why the change, Viven? After 22 years of calculated self-interest, why this sudden development of conscience? She considered the question seriously. It wasn't sudden, it was cumulative. Losing everything. Being forced to face my mother every week. The person who knows all my worst patterns and won't let me hide from them. Seeing our daughters choose you because you offered them truth while I gave them manipulation. She paused. Mostly it was finally seeing you clearly. The man you actually are, not the convenient fiction I created. And who am I, in your current assessment? Max asked, genuinely curious. Someone with integrity. Someone who values truth above comfort. Someone capable of both justice and mercy. She met his eyes directly. Someone I never deserved. Max studied her, searching for signs of the old Viven, the performative emotion, the calculated vulnerability she'd used so effectively throughout their marriage. He found instead a rawness, a directness he'd never seen in her before. I received word from my lawyers yesterday, Max said, changing the direction of the conversation. The divorce is final. You should be getting the paperwork soon. I know, Viven said quietly. My lawyer called me. I've made some adjustments to the terms, Max continued. The apartment is now in your name, not a rental. The monthly allowance has been increased modestly, and the geographical restrictions have been lifted. You're no longer required to remain in New Hampshire. Viven looked up, surprised. Why? Your mother speaks highly of your efforts. My surveillance confirms sustained behavior change. The terms were always meant to be punitive, but also rehabilitative. You appear to be rehabilitating. Thank you, she said simply. Though I'm not sure I want to leave Portsmouth now. I've started building something here, something real. Max nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. The choice is yours now. As he prepared to leave, Viven asked, Max, the girls mentioned you're hosting Christmas at your penthouse. Are you happy now? Truly? The question caught him slightly off guard. I'm at peace, he answered carefully. I no longer live divided against myself. That's its own form of happiness. Viven smiled sadly. I'm glad. You deserve that much at least. Max stood to go, but paused. The Women's Center where you volunteer, do they need financial support? Always, Viven replied. They operate on a shoestring budget. Max nodded. I'll have the Donahue Foundation contact them anonymously. They'd appreciate that, Viven said, and so would I. As Max walked away, he realized something unexpected. The burning anger that had fueled his meticulous revenge had cooled, not into forgiveness exactly, but into something more like indifference. Viven no longer held power over his emotions, either positive or negative. It was, he decided, the final victory. Freedom not just from her betrayal, but from its hold on his psyche. Spring arrived in Boston with its customary blend of lingering chill and tentative new growth. 1 year had passed since the day Viven had thrown Max's belongings onto their rain-soaked lawn, setting in motion events that had transformed their family forever. Max stood at the window of his penthouse, watching the city awaken below. His phone buzzed with a message from Ford. Final surveillance report attached. As discussed, monitoring ends today. For 12 months, Max had maintained discreet surveillance on Viven, gradually reducing its scope as her behavior consistently demonstrated genuine change. Today marked the end of that chapter, a decision Max had made not out of sentimentality, but pragmatism. The data was clear. Further monitoring served no purpose. The past year had been one of remarkable transition, Helix Pharmaceuticals had flourished under his now public leadership. The Donahue Foundation had established itself as a major philanthropic force in Boston. His daughters had graduated with honors, Audrey already working in research at Helix, Penelope pursuing graduate studies in psychology. The doorbell interrupted his reflections. His daughters had arrived for their weekly brunch, a tradition established during the family's reconfiguration. "Dad," Penelope greeted him with a warm hug. "You'll never guess who we ran into yesterday." "Douglas Apprentice," Audrey supplied before Max could respond. "Looking absolutely terrible, working as a car salesman in Revere." "How the mighty fall," Max observed mildly, leading them to the dining room where their meal awaited. As they settled in, Audrey hesitated before saying, "We also spoke to Mom yesterday." Max's expression remained neutral. "And how is your mother?" "Good, actually," Penelope replied, studying her father's reaction. "She's been promoted to program director at the Women's Center, and she's going back to school part-time for a social work degree." "That's commendable," Max said sincerely. "She asked about you," Audrey added carefully. "Not in a personal way. She wanted to know if we thought the Donahue Foundation might be interested in a new initiative the center is developing for financial literacy education for vulnerable women." Max considered this. "Have her send a formal proposal to the foundation. It will be evaluated on its merits like any other." The twins exchanged glances. "Dad," Penelope began hesitantly, "it's been a year. Mom has genuinely changed. She's built a new life focused on helping others. She's made amends where possible." "I'm aware," Max replied evenly. "That's why I've progressively relaxed the restrictions on her living situation and increased her financial support." "But you still won't speak to her directly," Audrey pointed out. "Everything goes through lawyers or us." Max set down his fork, regarding his daughters. "Seriously, what exactly are you advocating for?" "Not reconciliation," Audrey clarified quickly. "We understand that's not possible. Just closure, maybe," Penelope suggested. "For all of us. The divorce is final. You've both moved on. Maybe it's time to let go of the last pieces of anger." Max considered their words carefully. His daughters had shown remarkable resilience and maturity throughout the family's upheaval. They deserved his honest reflection. "I don't harbor anger toward your mother anymore," he said finally. "Anger requires emotional investment. What I maintain is boundaries, the natural consequence of broken trust." "That's fair," Audrey acknowledged. "We just thought—" "You thought I might be holding on to resentment that's now harming me more than her," Max finished the thought. "I appreciate your concern, but I assure you my decisions are rational, not emotional." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Max found himself returning to his daughter's observations after they had gone. Was he perhaps maintaining distance from Vivian, not out of practicality, but lingering hurt? Later that afternoon, Max attended the grand opening of the Donahue Research Center at Massachusetts General Hospital, a state-of-the-art facility funded by his foundation. As he cut the ceremonial ribbon and gave brief remarks about the importance of medical innovation, he scanned the assembled crowd and froze momentarily. In the back row stood Vivian, dressed simply but professionally. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away, clearly uncertain of her welcome. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and toured the facility, Max approached her directly. "This is unexpected," he said without preamble. "I hope it's not unwelcome," Vivian replied, tension evident in her posture. "Audrey mentioned the opening. I wanted to see your work firsthand." "Why?" Vivian hesitated. "Closure, perhaps. Seeing the man you really are, doing what you were meant to do. The person I should have supported instead of undermined." Before Max could respond, they were interrupted by Bernard Whitmore. "Max, brilliant ceremony," Bernard enthused before noticing Vivian. "Oh, Mrs. Donahue, I didn't realize you were—" "That is Miss Lockhart now," Vivian corrected gently. "And I'm just a guest, Bernard, here to support an important cause." She excused herself gracefully, moving toward the exit. Max watched her go, noting the absence of the manipulative social performance that had once been her hallmark. Later that evening,
Max sat in his home office reviewing the day's events. On impulse, he opened his secure server and accessed the final surveillance report on Vivan. It documented a life remarkably transformed. Steady employment at the Women's Center, regular classes toward her degree, continued sobriety, and simplified living focused on service rather than acquisition. His phone rang, a blocked number. "Maxwell Donahue," he answered. "It's me," Vivian said simply. "I hope it's all right that I called. Audrey gave me your private number for emergencies." "Is there an emergency?" Max asked, his tone neutral. "No, nothing like that." She paused. "I wanted to thank you for not having me removed from the ceremony today. I shouldn't have come without asking first." "It was a public event," Max replied calmly. "You had as much right to be there as anyone." The line fell silent for a moment. "I also wanted to say something," Vivan continued finally. "Seeing you today in your element, respected for your true accomplishments, I felt proud of you, Max. Not as my ex-husband or for what your success might mean for me, but simply proud to have known you, to see you living authentically." Max found himself surprised by her sincerity. "Thank you. That's unexpectedly generous. The proposal for the financial literacy program will be on your foundation director's desk tomorrow," Vivan added, shifting to more neutral territory. "I hope you'll consider it on its merits. These women need the skills I lacked, the ability to build their own security rather than seeking it through manipulation of others." "I'll review it personally," Max promised. As the call ended, Max realized the conversation had lacked the tension he would have expected. In its place was something he hadn't anticipated, a calm acknowledgement of their shared past and separate futures. 2 weeks later, Max stood on the observation deck of his research facility in Cambridge, watching scientists work in the laboratories below. His phone vibrated with a message from Ford. Final resolution complete. Terence Walsh deported from Australia for visa fraud. No remaining loose ends. Max allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. The last player in the drama of his marriage's dissolution had faced final consequences. The circle was now complete. His assistant approached with a tablet. "The board for the Donahue Foundation has unanimously approved funding for the Portsmouth Women's Center Financial Literacy Program. They were quite impressed with the proposal. Shall I process the grant documents?" "Yes," Max confirmed, "and add a confidential supplemental grant for expanded program capacity, the full amount I indicated yesterday." "Of course, sir. Also, your daughters are waiting in your office for the drive to the airport." Audrey and Penelope were taking their first international trip to visit their great-grandfather's homeland, a journey of heritage exploration Max had arranged as a graduation gift. "Dad, are you sure you won't come with us?" Penelope asked as he entered his office. "It would mean so much to have you there, explaining Grandfather Alexander's journey firsthand." "This trip is about you discovering your roots independently," Max replied. "My presence would color your experience. This is your journey." As they said their goodbyes, Audrey asked, hesitantly, "We heard the Foundation approved Mom's program. Thank you for that." "The program has merit," Max said simply. "Its originator is irrelevant to its value." The twins exchanged a look he'd come to recognize, their silent communication when they were assessing one of their parents. "You've really let it go, haven't you?" Audrey observed. "The anger, the hurt." "Not forgotten," Max clarified, "but released from its power to influence my decisions." Penelope smiled. "That's as close to forgiveness as you get, isn't it, Dad?" "Perhaps," Max acknowledged. "Though I prefer to think of it as clarity. People must be seen for who they truly are, not who we wish them to be or who they pretend to be." "Even if they change?" Penelope pressed. "Change doesn't erase history," Max replied. "It creates a new present. Your mother appears to be creating a worthwhile present that deserves recognition but not revision of the past." After his daughters departed for their journey, Max returned to the observation deck.
Below, scientists worked on treatments that would eventually save thousands of lives, his true legacy far beyond the personal drama that had consumed the past year. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, a link to a news article about the Donahue Foundation's grant to the Portsmouth Women's Center with a simple message. "Thank you for judging the work on its merits. This will help many women find their way to independence. VL." Max didn't respond, but he didn't block the number either. Some doors remained permanently closed, but windows could occasionally be opened for specific, limited purposes. As he watched the scientists below, Max reflected on the journey from that rain-soaked lawn a year ago to this moment of completion. The husband who had nodded calmly as his belongings were thrown onto wet grass had not been weak but strategic, conserving energy for the true battle ahead. The wife who had screamed triumphantly about emptying everything had been right in one respect. The marriage had indeed been emptied of all pretense, all illusion, all false compromise. And the document that had turned Vivian's face ashen the following day had been merely the first page in a longer story of justice. Not revenge, but consequences, proportionate to actions. Maxwell Donahue had emerged not just wealthy and powerful, but authentic, a man whose outer life finally matched his inner truth. He had taught his daughters the most valuable lesson of all, that integrity, once compromised, can never be fully restored, but new foundations can always be built on clearer understanding. The silent viper, as some in Boston's business community had taken to calling him, had struck with precision, purpose, and finality. The poison had been delivered not in rage but in calculation, not for destruction but for justice. And now, as spring brought new growth to Boston, Maxwell Donahue looked forward rather than back. The final victory over betrayal was not the punishment of the betrayer, but freedom from the betrayal's hold on his future. He stood in peaceful silence, knowing at last that his life, like the city before him, had moved into its season of renewal.